Hello and welcome to the Institution of Agricultural Engineers 2020 Landwards Conference. I'm your host, Andy Newbold, editor of Landwards magazine, and today I am joined by Martin Hamer, National Sales Manager of Fendt, UK, Ireland and the Netherlands. And I'm going to hand you over to Martin now. Hello, Martin.
Hello, Andy, and thank you very much for inviting me to come along and give you a presentation. And the presentation is based on the lean principles and resilience in agricultural engineering, open bracket, from the sales point of view, close bracket. So I hope I can entertain you and give you an informative few minutes of comment about what this means in agriculture and what it means for Fendt and how we've been progressing in the current challenging times. Andy asked me to set the scene by telling you all a little bit about myself. I joined AGCO in 1996, and in the time that I've worked for AGCO, I've been privileged to work in lots of different departments, training, engineering, marketing, and in sales, which is where I've been for the last 10 years, looking after the Challenger brand and now the Fendt brand for the UK, Ireland and the Netherlands. My background, I previously worked for a John Deere tractor dealer, and I studied City and Guilds engineering and passed agricultural engineering at Technical College. I'm also a farmer's son and indeed a part-time farmer, and I live in Oxfordshire. And just to add a little interest, I'm also a church bell ringer. So if you hear some rather elaborate noise, it could be the bells. So just to sort of put those in picture format for you, just to talk a little bit about the farming activities at home. We have a 55 hectare grass and arable farm, and we focus ourselves on some old grazing meadows, which we're very pleased to have in a HLS scheme. We run some cattle on those, grazing them, and we're very lucky to have some orchids growing. And if you look at the view over the gate in the top left-hand picture, that's a view of a fen. And probably not a lot of you knew that there is such a thing as a fen in the North Oxfordshire countryside, but a very important wildlife site and very useful on the farm for securing HLS subsidies. And of course, the cattle play their part in managing that. My journey to where I was, of course, everybody starts off with their first love. As I said, I worked for a John Deere dealer, and the tractor that you can see there currently resides in my yard. I'm ashamed to say with a Fendt shirt on, but my first love was John Deere. I worked for a John Deere dealer, and I started working for that John Deere dealer on the 1st of August 1988. And the keen amongst you will notice the registration of this tractor is F, August 88. My first job in my first week working for the dealer was to PDI this tractor when it was brand new and fit the loader. So I'm emotionally attached, and it's nothing whatsoever to do with brand loyalty. But of course, we move on from our first loves and we grow up, and the brands that AGCO has to offer, of course, have been at the forefront of my mind and in my purchasing decisions. So this is a picture of me ably assisted by my daughter, combining some winter barley with my Massey Ferguson combine. So rather an extravagance for a small area that we grow arable crops on, but something which I enjoy immensely, gives me a lot of satisfaction. Some of you may also notice there's a bit of wheat in that barley. That's a unique crop in North Oxfordshire, a multi-cropping, new concept, new idea. Of course, I am loyal to the brand, and I'm pleased to say that I am in the Fendt camp in terms of machinery ownership on the farm at home. And this is a picture of my single rotor Fendt rake, which I'm proud to own. Something else which I'm very interested in from the agricultural point of view is regenerative and sustainable agriculture. And I am a direct drilling enthusiast, and I've been direct drilling on our farm at home for the last 6 years with great success, both in crops, soil, stability and the composition of the soil, and also from a financial point of view. And I always try to focus customers and our dealers on the financial element of what we do. And much as I love large, shiny tractors, and of course I'm paid on the results of selling them, I am very consciously aware that looking after the soil, looking after the environment, and farming in harmony with it is best for the planet, and probably also best for the profit margin. So I definitely believe in no-till and direct drilling, and it could also be the saviour of the small arable farmer and maybe the planet. So environmental message over. Talking a little bit about Fendt then, let me introduce you. Well, Fendt products, you probably think they're all made in Germany, but actually the full line of Fendt products that I'm responsible for the sales of, some of those products are made in North America, and we make tractors at our Jackson, Minnesota facility. Very nice in about 3 weeks of May, very nice in about 3 weeks of September. Other than that, far too hot or far too cold, but a nice place to visit. We also make large square balers in our Heston, Kansas facility, right in the middle of the Midwest there. Our combine harvesters that we sell in the Fendt brand are made in the former Laverda factory, which has been part of AGCO for some time now, and that is based in the town of Briganza in northern Italy, not very far from Venice, about 45 minutes, 50 minutes from Venice. So Germany is the heart of Fendt, and you wouldn't be surprised to learn that the bulk of manufacturing of Fendt products happens in Germany. And these are the plants that we operate. Wolfenbüttel round balers, which is a business that we took over fairly recently from Lely, and before that was the Welger plant. Holmusen, which is not far from Leipzig in the former Eastern Germany, new factory for Fendt, where we make forage harvesters, and we also make our crop spraying equipment there. Voigt, which is the grass equipment factory. Previously, Feller product would have been built there. Waldstatten, which is for the loader wagon product. And then Baumenheim, not far from Munich, which is where we manufacture our cabs for our tractors. And then finally, Marktoberdorf, about an hour and a half south of Munich, is where we manufacture and assemble our Fendt tractor range, wheeled tractor range. And we also manufacture the world famous Vario transmission. Just to give you a little bit of a picture of where that is, that's the United Kingdom and a map of sort of northwestern Europe, and you can see the arrows pointing to the Marktoberdorf headquarters of Fendt in southern Germany. Not very far at all from the Austrian border, and if ever you see the chocolate box with a picture of German countryside on, it's almost exactly what it looks like in the vicinity of Marktoberdorf. It is truly beautiful and spectacular. It's lovely scenery, it's lovely clean air. It's a very nice part of the world to visit, and indeed to live, I'm sure, for the locals. It's not very far at all from the Austrian border, and you can see from the photograph below the Alps in the background and all that fresh Bavarian air. Well, fresh when they're not spreading their slurry. But it is a truly beautiful factory, and a very, very nice visit to go and have a look around. An extremely high quality level of production going on. So the beauty is not only on the outside of the factory, it's also on the inside. AGCO recently spent a vast amount of money increasing the size of the plant, almost doubling the size of it, to incorporate new assembly halls and new production lines. The plant is immaculate, as you would imagine. Inside, it's expertly maintained, and even the heating system, which keeps all of the workers warm in the cold climate in the wintertime, is green, and the heat for the plant is supplied either from recycled heat from the machine tools or from a wood chip plant, which is run by a local cooperative just over the road. So a very, very nice environment to work, and conducive to producing a very, very high quality product, which we market and sell as. So what happens in the UK and Ireland? We sell our products through 24 dealers in the UK, and in Ireland we have 5 dealers, and then we have 2 distributors that we look after in the Netherlands. Slightly different arrangement. In the Netherlands, the 2 distributors have their own network of dealers, who then sell on the product to the final customer. So slightly different arrangement to the UK. If you look closely at the map, you can see most of our dealers on there are noted. They have fairly large areas, and the numbers underneath indicate the tractor industry in each dealer's area. So good coverage of the country. We have an opportunity for a dealer in West Wales, if anybody knows of anybody who might be interested, but a good coverage of the bulk of the UK and Ireland and the Netherlands. So, March 2020. We think of ourselves as a lean manufacturing machine, and indeed that's very, very important in the theory that we run the plants on, and the way that we try to conduct our manufacturing, distribution, purchasing of our products. So what happens when that lean machine comes face to face with COVID-19? Well, could have been a train crash. But what happened to start with, communication within the company was pretty good. Now, there were, as you know, at that time, flurry of announcements. We were all beginning to think, crikey, this was in China. We thought it was just there. And now all of a sudden it's our problem. And very quickly it was to become the whole world's problem. From the plant and the company's point of view, we were very quickly into the mind frame of first thing we need to do is the well-being of our own staff. The company's nothing without its people, and if we don't protect our people and keep them safe, then we have got a major serious issue. So from the middle of March, people were advised or were indicated to work from home. They were indicated to implement social distancing practices, and most of our plants were actually closed. In fact, the loader wagon plant didn't need to close. They could meet all the required restrictions locally without closing. The rest of the plants were all closed, and that was to reorganize the plants themselves. So how would we conduct production? How would we make it work within the plant to keep everybody safe and to make sure that we don't contribute to the staff getting the disease and indeed spreading it, which is obviously what we don't want. So we took the decision in a lot of cases to shut plants down, and in Italy, the government insisted that we close the combine factory for some period of time. Some countries, we already have short-time working practices. There's a good arrangement in Germany, which I believe the furlough scheme for the UK was modelled on, whereby staff are asked to work part-time working and work from home or limited shifts. And then part of the compensation for the lower time worked is picked up by the government. So those were enacted. So we looked after our staff, and then of course we need to look after our distribution. So we don't sell any tractors directly, we rely on our dealer network to do that. So we have close contacts and ties with our dealer network. So we begin monitoring the dealers. Are they open? Are they closed? Do they have problems? Are they restricted? Can they receive deliveries? Can they respond to breakdowns? Can they receive parts? So we enable that level of communication, and we keep a very close eye on it. Then, of course, we need to look at our suppliers. We know what we're having to do in our factories. What are our suppliers doing in theirs? And then the question that every serious business has to ask themselves, what about cash? Now, we need to look at the state of our finances. If we don't invoice tractors every day, that's going to make a significant impact on the amount of cash which is flowing into our business. What are the implications of that? What are the numbers? What if this carries on for a long time? How do we plan for that? Then we have to think about our dealers. If our dealers cannot sell product, cannot go out to repair machines, cannot conduct after-sales work, and they can't invoice for that work, how are they going to be affected? And then finally, what about the end customers? Will they stop? Will they stop buying? Will they stop spending money with us? And will sales of products actually continue? So we evaluate those avenues, and then we compile and look at what actually happened. The final thing, of course, that we needed to do was implement a degree of change management with our own staff. AGCO has around 20,000 staff worldwide, employees. Now, one thing that's happened during this COVID-19 situation is that those of us involved in agriculture, of course, have become essential workers. We've become key workers. And that responsibility has to be conveyed to the people that work within the business. And a lot of a lot of our staff took on that responsibility and perhaps revelled in it and excelled in in the way they conducted and discharged their duties. But others needed a little bit of coaching. This is a responsibility they perhaps hadn't thought about and something which they've had to then take on. So a bit of change management was involved, and also to make sure everybody feels that they're pulling together. So, early actions. We talked about communication. We have what we call all hands briefings, where we have the entire staff on a WebEx and we give information to the staff via that format. We implement change management. Clearly, people who are used to coming to the office every day now have to be used to working from home every day, and the challenges or opportunities that that brings. Giving this presentation from my sitting room is quite a nice feature of working from home, rather than being in the office in Abbey Park and having to conduct it from there. But there also needs to be some reassurance of staff to make sure they understand the changes and make sure that they fit in with the new working requirements, and the company can give them the tools that they need to be able to do that. So we talked about plant closures. It was necessary to close the plants in a lot of cases so that we could deep clean, so we could put social distancing measures in place. And in our parts warehouses, that was an interesting challenge. We can't switch our parts warehouses off, although the French government tried very hard to at one point, because we have a requirement to ship spare parts every day. So that was quite a challenge to be able to put social distancing measures in place, which of course comply with not only the local legislation, but union regulations and concerns, and making sure that the workers' committees are happy with that, so that staff can work in a safe, socially distanced way. PPE, of course, then became an issue. We needed face masks, we needed visors, we needed to protect our staff. How do we go about sourcing PPE? Well, luckily, our purchasing and materials supply managers are very good at finding locations for the components and items that we need within our production facilities. And sourcing PPE was also something that came to hand quite nicely. But we also found ourselves in a situation where we could do quite a bit ourselves. So we began manufacturing with our suppliers face masks, and also we put our laser printers to very good use, or 3D printers to very good use to produce visors as well. So again, some of those were distributed into the wider communities local to the plants, again to help with the battle to combat the virus. Now, those of you looking at the face mask might think, crikey, that's a good idea. I wonder who thought about putting Fendt on there. And the inspiration, of course, for some of these ideas comes from very, very strange places. So as you can see, this very smart gentleman in our organisation could well have been the origin of the idea of the Fendt face mask. Well done, Sam. So, how will our distribution cope? Looking at the distribution, first question is, are they all open? Are they working? And what restrictions are they under? What help do they need? So it was getting in contact with the dealers, making sure their staff understand different processes. And at the beginning, we thought that cash would be a major issue for all of those dealers and our own businesses. So looking at how we discuss cash management within the businesses, looking at how they implement government requirements and government guidance were at the fore of our planning with the dealers and part of our communication with them. Also, now that everybody was working from home, it did give us an awful lot more time, and has still, or is still giving us more time to call our dealers and have contact. Social distancing requirements and the way our business works means a lot of our business previously had been conducted face to face. But what we're doing now is we're spending a lot more time on the phone, a lot more time on calls such as this medium to actually get to grips with our dealers and have discussions. We have sold tractors by Zoom, not many, but we have, and we have concluded deals with it. And again, maybe that's a view of what will happen in the future as technology progresses and becomes more accepted. So we look at weekly reporting, we look at delivering business management updates, and we ran a full training course in very quick time for all of our dealers on the above items to make sure they had the tools within their business to become and remain sustainable. What about the supply chains? Well, AGCO is a corporation which has grown by acquisition, and the way the corporation has gone about those acquisitions is probably the topic for another conversation, and there are many, many, many examples of how AGCO has purchased different companies. It purchased Fendt, it purchased Massey Ferguson, it purchased Laverda, it purchased Valtra, to name the larger brands over the period of time. Every time the corporation purchased a company, Laverda would be a good example as a combine manufacturing plant. You also purchase a supply chain and a supply system. Now, once you've bought 4 or 5 companies, all of a sudden you realize that we've got different purchasing managers using different structures in different plants, buying the same component from often the same suppliers, and very often not at the same price. So AGCO, one of the first things they did way back in 2004 was put together a centralized supply chain. So when we purchased a business, we integrated the supply of components that business needed into our own supply chain. So our own supply managers and purchasing managers took over that business. So that means all of our factories are supplied by a central purchasing decision, which would take decisions on what plants we are supplying from what suppliers. So that was all nicely centralized, and actually was a real bonus when things started to get sticky with the supply chain. Because the purchasing managers are required to carry out risk assessments on their suppliers. It's because we don't want all our eggs in one basket. So we may have different suppliers for the same component in different parts of the world. We don't want all our eggs in one basket, and we don't necessarily want the cheapest supplier, but we do want the suppliers which give us the least risk, because what we don't want is our plants closed for any length of time or lines stopped because we've got component shortages. They far outweigh the short-term costs of cheaper components from more risky suppliers. So we've learned a lot of those lessons previously. One of the lessons that we also learned was that Chinese factories began to shut down in late January. And indeed, China as a whole was shut for some period of time at late January. So our factories in China and therefore our global purchasing arrangements were already aware of, oh, crikey, this is serious. This is what happens. Now we understand how to cope with it. So then as it started to roll out in the rest of the world, we learned those lessons very early on from our Chinese facilities on how we make decisions on what we supply where and how we make sure we keep the plants running and keep everyone safe. We took decisions on shipping. Normally, we would ship via the most economical route, which is nearly always by sea for long distance freight. But in this case, we could see a tidal wave of shortages coming towards us, and decisions were then made to switch shipping of componentry from different parts of the world, from the slower sea lanes to faster rail, and indeed some cases air transport, to make sure we're building up our level of supplies and componentry in plants ready to cope if shortages were to occur. We also enhance our local supply routes. So where we have local suppliers, where they didn't have a problem, we would ask them to increase production to make sure we had some bunker stock, so that we could make sure we could get things over any humps or any rinky-dinks within production shutdowns. Now, in some cases, as the pandemic spread into Europe and everything began to lock down, when we were in that process, we could see that some of our suppliers were maybe not going to recover from this very easily, and some may not recover at all. So we took the decision in some cases where we had to actually step in and save suppliers. In 1 or 2 cases, that meant taking a management role within a supplier company and putting cash into that business and staffing and resource to get the business back up and running to supply componentry. And in other cases, we actually had to take the supply of that component back in-house and begin to manufacture those components ourselves. So because of this lean, flexible, centralized system, those decisions were easier and meant we were actually shut down for less time. So as all our EU plants were closed, or most of them were closed in that period in mid-March, our supply and material managers were actually in overdrive because the company had told them that the edict is, we go to the suppliers, while the plants are closed, we need to build up stocks in our factories so when we start production back up, we have componentry to enable a seamless start to production. We don't want stop-start. We want the parts in place, the componentry in place, so that we can then have a smooth take-up, so that we can get back up and running at full production, or as close to full production as possible, with minimal delays. So these guys were really working hard in that period when everybody else was looking around wondering what was going to happen. And it worked really well. But what about cash? Well, AGCO is a public company. It has over $9 billion of reserves, so we can stand a week or two without invoicing anything. And as it turned out, it wasn't a massive issue, and it worked well, and AGCO didn't have any issues at all, really, in cash management. However, that doesn't mean to say that the view on cash management was tightened significantly to make sure that incomes and expenditures were matched as well as possible. Clearly, with the lockdown and the restrictions that went on, a lot of expenditure was not then necessary and not made, but additional expenditure was necessary in the case of shipping parts by more expensive routes, etc. So managing those two gains and potential losses and trying to get them to balance out was a very important thing to do to make sure that our cash flow and our financial reserves were not depleted. So shortfalls, tight spots, we tried to plan for them and forecast for them as best as possible. And as Donald Rumsfeld, I think, said, it's far better to have a known unknown than an unknown unknown. So trying to look at what those things would be, look at where the bottlenecks could be, and financially plan for them was very important. And I think we did a very good job of doing that. So what did we learn from this whole little exercise? Well, isn't Zoom great? Isn't WebEx wonderful? Or Teams, or BlueJeans, and all those other systems for communication that we never knew existed. Well, those of us over 40 anyway, never knew existed up until the pandemic. But that really did help us keep contact with people, and it's made everybody within industry take a step change towards embracing this communication technology. And I think probably in the future will save us a lot of money on travel and meeting times, and we can be more efficient as a result. Those of us in sales, of course, would look down on the purchasing and material supply managers, but maybe they weren't such bad chaps after all. Our tractor factory was actually closed for less than 3 weeks. Our production, when it started back up, was not then interrupted again at all. So starting a line with circa 200 tractors on it and having all the components in place to continue that where you left off is some achievement, considering the way that suppliers and supply routes were interrupted during the pandemic and during the shutdown. So really, having good management and good systems within the purchasing and material supply lines really has paid dividends for AGCO, because it allowed us to pick back up very, very seamlessly. Isn't it amazing what 3D printers can do? Who'd have thought that producing visors would have been a useful, necessary requirement? And who'd have thought we had so many of them in the company? So very, very useful. So COVID-19 and the pandemic, its impact was very, very difficult. Well, nobody forecast it. Nobody thought it was going to happen. So it was extremely difficult to then start to make plans. And it probably is still quite difficult now to make plans for what's going to happen with COVID as we progress forward. But, and there's a very important but, we're in the agriculture business. We sell tractors to farmers. And if you ask any farmer what the biggest variable is and uncontrollable is within their business, even after the last 6 months of pandemic and COVID-19, they would say it's the weather. And I would say as well that for a lot of our farming contractors and customers and dealers, particularly in the eastern counties of the UK, for the first 3-4 weeks of the pandemic, they almost didn't notice, because it also coincided with it stopping raining for the first time in 6 months. Our workshops for our dealers in the eastern counties, servicing work, PDI work, shipping of product, shipping of wear parts, was enormous in that period from the middle of March when it stopped raining right the way through until the end of the potato planting season, coming up until May, and then into the grass season. So it does show us that our initial reaction was everybody's going to stop, everything's going to stop, and we're going to run out of cash. Actually, the weather trumped it. So a few thoughts to leave you with. Nothing's as unpredictable as the weather, and it can absolutely be your best friend and produce glorious pictures and scenes like this. Or you can end up with that when you do get stuck in a rut. So global pandemics, yeah, we can cope with those. The weather, we're working on it.
Martin,
thank you.
We will never accuse you of being stuck in a rut. That's all I can say. Thank you very much for that. That has been a great insight. One just sort of objective comment almost is that there's a lot of things have hurriedly been chucked into place around COVID in terms of ways to keep businesses rolling and to keep the ag engineering rolling forwards. And I'm beginning to notice that these are now becoming embedded as long-term structural changes in the business. And it does beg the question that perhaps it took a pandemic to bring about these changes, but the reality is now those changes are in place, we ain't ever going back.
You're right. And you can see those changes have become part of our everyday life. We would think nothing of jumping in the car and going to see a customer or going to do a dealer review and have a discussion about business planning. And I'm sure my purchasing colleagues, my parts colleagues would have done exactly the same. But now the first way to resolve any of those issues is, shall we have a Zoom call? Shall we have a look at it? And then let's share the pictures, let's share the presentation, let's share the data, let's discuss it. You don't need to fly 500 miles to Germany to have that discussion. You can do it over the computer.
Yeah, in many ways, it's brought a degree of expediting in terms of that bit of wholly what we perceived as necessary of getting in the car, that 2 hours to go and see somebody. It's eliminated all of that, and it has made life a lot more straightforward in some ways.
It has. I mean, it's eliminated a lot of it, and I think those of us in the agricultural industry, we probably find ourselves halfway between consumer products and consumer marketing and ultimate just business purchasing. We're somewhere in the middle because our customers are influenced by the cost of the product and the cost to own a product. Therefore, you'd think that would be a fairly yes-no decision based on costings, but of course it isn't. There's also a lot of emotion involved in product purchasing by farmers and people in the ag industry. And there's also a lot of brand loyalty and the emotion that comes with branding and what brands you like. And to address those issues, yes, you can influence with online marketing, but in a lot of cases still, you need to go and talk to those people face to face.
Yeah, and it's the comment about the no substitute for a cup of tea around the kitchen table, or a socially distanced equivalent over the car bonnet.
Absolutely, yes, and we often run demonstration days and take customers' machines and show them, and everyone will say, yeah, I want to see it on my farm. I want to see it in the FAR 20, and I want to see it pull my cultivator up that bank because nothing else does. And you sometimes have to go down the route and you have to address that with people. Yeah. But as I say, the business is changing, and there's a lot of people now that research their products very, very thoroughly, and they know exactly what it is they want to buy. And it's our duty as a manufacturer to make sure we give them the ability to find all that information out. And I think certainly with Fendt we do. So it does get us a long way towards the kitchen table moment, as you put it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, behind the metal and behind the engineering in all of these things, and this is true for the Institution of Agricultural Engineers, we're all about the people. And behind the business is people. And we've got to make sure that connection works. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it, rather, or it's lost a lot of its value. Let's put it that way.
The other thing is, Andy, there's an awful lot of fun in that.
Yeah.
And we need to be motivated and enthused by our jobs, And if you get a bit of a buzz of going to see somebody and trying to sell them a product and getting a handshake, and there's some interest and some fun on both sides of that negotiation, isn't that what makes life? Isn't that what makes the wheel go round?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, look, Martin Hamer, thank you very much for your input this afternoon. It's been a fascinating presentation, and I'll say thank you now on behalf of the institution. Remember, we'll all be coming back together on Wednesday, the 4th of November at 11 o'clock for a live Zoom side-by-side Q&A with all the panelists. Put it in your diary now, Martin. And as I say, thank you very much, Martin, and we're going to say goodbye now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.